So good morning. Today's daf is Yevamot daf Kuf Tet Zayin 116, and we're actually at the top of daf Kuf Tet Zayin. We are 4 lines down, and second word on the line. Yesterday, we concluded with the start of a debate between Abaye and Rava regarding presumptions for names. So Abaye says that we're worried about multiple people with the same name and details. And so even if we think we know to whom we're referring, meaning there's one guy in this town who went from this place to that place that we all know about, maybe there's another guy. And so we need to check to see whether there are no other people who match the description, even if unlikely. Now, the extent to which we need to check is, where is it that there would be some kind of potential travel among the areas? That's the general understanding, as long as it's, reasonably possible for people to travel among those places. So that's the place where you would need to search. Rava, on the other hand, says we're not concerned about multiple people of the same name when we know of one person to whom we are referring. So we don't need to check to see whether there are others who may match the description, because that is very unlikely. Today, we continue this debate, and we're going to begin with a case where Abaye and Rava reverse opinions. So let's take a look, and we will see. So
Are we talking about a get or something, or what? Or
what?
Any star or a get or what?
Yeah. We're talking about we've so far we've mentioned a get and we've mentioned a shtar chov. So those are the 2 documents that we've been talking about. Now we're going to turn back to a get as an example. And yes, but it's potentially any legal document that has legal effect. So hahu gita. So there was this get. The ishtakach basura. It was found in surah. Uksiv bei hachi. And what does it say in it? Besura masa, in the city of Surah. Anan ben Chiyas Naharda. I, Anan ben Barchia from Naharda. Petaris Besrechis Plonis Intisi. That I am divorced. I am releasing and cutting off so and so, my wife. Uvdako Rabbanan Misura va'ad Narda. And they went from Surah to Narda to search to see whether there was anybody else by the same name. Below Hava Anan Barchia Achrina Levarma Anan Barchia Michagra Dahava Benarda. But there was one other guy. There actually, we thought that it was the guy in our town, but it turns out that there's another Anan Barchia who was originally from Chagra, but he was living in Naharda. Va'asu Sadi va'amar. And the witnesses came to us, and we did some further checking, and we found some witnesses. Dahu Yoma ki ikasev hahu gita anan barchia michagra gaban hava. So the witnesses said that on the day that the get was written in Surah, because the date, of course, was on the get. So Anan Barchia from Chagra was with us in Naharda, and so he wasn't in Surah where the get was written. So Amar Abaye, so Abaye says, that I, who generally say that we need to be worried, here we've done the checking, we found the guy, we found a potential other guy, but we've confirmed that other guy isn't the guy in our city, and so as a result, he's not the Anan Barchia we're looking for. So Dahad Kamrisa David Divinar my ba the surah. So given the fact that the witnesses said he was in Narda, so how could he be in Surah at the same time? So as a result, we can see that certainly it's the same guy, and so it's totally fine. Even though ordinarily Abaye would be worried about it as multiple people of the same name. Rava, of course, changes his opinion as well, as I introduced. So Amar Rava that here, while yes, I ordinarily am not concerned, you've now given me enough reason to be concerned. Maybe he took a flying camel and he was able to get from one place to the other. it's a question of sort of how literal we're supposed to take it. But the idea is that maybe he had some fast way of traveling. Inami b'kfitza, meaning, we often refer to the idea of kfitza saderach, of sort of shortening the land, of somehow being able to travel more quickly. Inami mile masar, or alternatively, and this is probably the most likely, he gave the authorization. Kedamar lahu Rav l'safrei, because as Rav told the scribes who would write Gittin, v'chein amar lahu Rav Huna l'safrei, and similarly Rav Huna would tell people the same thing. Ki itnichu b'shili, if you get the permission if you are in Shili, ksovu b'shili, you should write that the get was written in Shili. Afagav demimsaran mili behini, even though you got the permission to do it and you were told to write the get in Hini. V'chi isnichu behini, and if you were in Hini, ksovu behini, afagav demimsaran mili b'shili, that even if you get the authorization in a particular place, you write the get in the place that you're writing the get. And so as a result, the fact that it says in Surah doesn't mean that the guy was in Surah. It just means that it was written in Surah. And maybe the guy gave authorization when he was still in Nehardah. And so as a result, there is no indication that this is in fact not our guy. And so therefore, even Rava would actually reverse himself and say that we should be worried about this situation. Okay, so that is that piece of additional information. So it seems like what the question is I guess, and related on some degree to the question that you raised yesterday, Hanan, that in fact the issue is for at least Rava is one of reasonability, whereas it seems like Abaye says, have we done the due diligence, and are we fully convinced? Meaning, is there any presumption going on? And so, the question is sort of like, what kind of what is considered reasonable due diligence? So that this seems to be an interesting potential Gemara for that question of what's considered reasonable due diligence.
Can't you just ask the guy?
Well, I presume, that's a good question. Whether the issue is whether his testimony can affect the situation. I have not seen anything on that, but it's an excellent question. Let me do some checking to see whether
I could see if two people say that's my get, then but if one of them says no, I'm still married and happily, and that's not my star.
And I would think that is the case. I would think that that's the case, that it's got to be that the guy was saying that it's that, and of course they've got to have the same wife too, same wife's name. That also has to be the case.
Just historically, it would be interesting to find out like how did each city have a list of residents or something? I mean, in other words, how did they, you know what I mean? How did they do the?
How did they figure it out? Yeah. I mean, they must have sent messengers around to say that it's to say that to ask the question. So there is a note here that I'm seeing that says that both of the wives were claiming that it must be that both of the wives were claiming that the get was theirs. Right. Yeah, which makes total sense. That absolutely, it's got to be that way. Otherwise, if one of them is saying it's not my get, so then that should eliminate the question. So it's got to be that two people are claiming it. So okay, so ma hava alayhu deshumshme. So yesterday we had this case of the sesame seeds where person number one deposited the sesame seeds with person number two, but when person number one came to claim them, person number two said, I've already returned them. So person number one then describes the container and the amount of the seeds. And now the question is do we say that that's sufficient to convince us that person number two still has them? Or do we say that we have to be worried that maybe these are different seeds? So my hava alayo deshum, what's the story with regard to the case of the sesame seeds? So Rabbi Yemer Amar lo chashin. We're not worried about anything being switched out, and so as a result, person number one will win. He's the depositor. He's going to make the sufficient claim, and we're going to assume that these sesame seeds belong to him. Ravina Amar chashina. Ravina, however, disagrees and says no. We have to be worried about the fact that maybe the guy number two is telling the truth, and the fact that they've switched out the things, even the Swiss National sesame seeds, even though the amount and location is the same. The Hilchasa Chayshinan, and the halacha is that we in fact are worried about this issue, and so that is in fact, it seems to be how we would paskin. So okay, so that is with respect to the issue of names and even identifying marks with respect to claims of competing claims as to whether or not people the depositor could get the stuff back from the custodian, and the two of them.
What's the depositor supposed to do in order to make sure this doesn't happen? I mean,
I think probably a signed contract would help, would win the case here. Here it's just words of both people, but if you would have a signed contract, so then the fact that he has the contract, the deposit contract, still that would be an indication of the fact that
usually a shomer is not a contract, right? I mean, all this stuff where somebody's storing. Well, it's usually not.
Usually, that you make a good point. Although pikadon could also be it can also be collateral. So it could be that there was a contract in connection with it.
Right. But just like usually, I'm just thinking of like somebody who's going away and somebody's watching it, right? I mean, all those cases, right? In civil, right? Usually there's not a written, maybe there is, I don't know. My impression.
No, certainly when I take in the mail of my next door neighbor, I don't have a written contract, or ask him to take in my mail, I don't have a written contract. So you're absolutely right.
When you lend somebody something, it's usually not a contract, right?
Correct, 100%. But I think that it shows that you have to ask the question of, is the person that you're going to a reliable person. So I think that if you ask yourself the question, is this somebody that I can rely on? And the answer is yes, well, then you'll probably be fine. But if in fact you're going to say that,
well, the answer to that question can only be answered post facto.
Sorry?
The answer to that question can only be answered post facto.
Yes. Well, I think we all, maybe what you're saying is that by definition, these kinds of cases are going to be surprises. It's like I would never have suspected this guy to be, to give me a hard time. So fair. That's certainly a fair point. Interesting to think about. So. We have to, God willing, we should just all be honest, but sometimes you need to.
Well, maybe there was a mistake here.
Meaning?
Maybe maybe he had another barrel of sesame seeds or something, I don't know. Maybe he forgot and gave it to some guy. He forgot who lent it to him or something, or.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. You meaning maybe the depositor, the watcher, the custodian actually gave it to somebody else and just forgot it was person number one. Yeah, could very well be. Everybody could be trying to be honest in this case.
Right.
So 100%. I think one needs to sort of evaluate the importance and the putting on our lawyer hats, right? We if you want to evaluate the importance of the particular relationship and the in particular item. You give somebody the diamond ring. You either need to know that it's a very close relationship, right? It's your brother or somebody like that. So as a result, you're not worried about it. Or if you're giving somebody the multi-million-dollar ticket to the Powerball that you won, but you're about to you're about to get on a flight or something, and you don't want to go bring the ticket with you. Well, then you probably want to have some kind of contract that says that I'm depositing something like that with somebody. So I think that all the circumstances need to come into effect. And here, it seems like this was a business transaction when the guy deposited
right.
To catch stand up. In the end, the Gemara says that in the sesame seed case that we will allow that the halacha is that we're going to allow the custodian to retain it, that we're not going to give it back, even though the claimant is able to identify the barrel and identify the amount. We're going to say that that's not enough to win the case, and you would need something like a contract or witnesses or exactly something along those lines to indicate that it's legit. Exactly. So again, presumably here we're dealing with there no witnesses on the deposit and no witnesses on the taking it back. If you had witnesses for the deposit, presumably the custodian would need witnesses for the yes, I'm saying two, at least two, yes. So then you would have, and frankly, if you have one, then presumably the custodian would need some kind of witness on his side as well, or at least maybe there would be a shvua in that case. But we haven't gotten to the Seder Nezikin, and we will deal with a lot of those kind of questions in Seder Nezikin. So all right, well now let's continue, and we're talking about whether or not there was peace between the husband and the wife, and if there was not peace, katata beino leveina, if there was argument, if there was conflict between the two of them, well then we're not going to believe her when she comes back. Well, what in the world does conflict mean? So that's where we pick up next. So hechidami katata beino leveina, what does that mean? So Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel be'omeres levala garsheni. It's where the wife says, I want a divorce, so please divorce me. Because obviously the man needs to take the action there, and so she's just requesting that they get divorced. Well, the Gemara responds, "Kul nami amru hachi." No. That would be, there are too many situations. I don't know about this, but in any event, there are too many situations where a woman says that and she doesn't really mean it, and so as a result, we don't want to actually not believe the woman in that situation. So that people say it when they're angry. So Ella, I don't think people do that. I hope people don't do that. But in any event,
people do that. Yes.
Yeah. The Ella be'omeres levala girashtani. So it's rather. So we're going to change it and say that no. It's when the woman says, "You have divorced me." Well, one second. One second. In an interesting case of parallel language, we should believe her just like Rav Hamnuna says, using Hamnuna and Hemna, very similar language. In any event, the Amar Rav Hamnuna, because what does Rav Hamnuna say? Ishasha Amra Lavala Girish Tani Nemenes, right? If a woman says that the man has divorced her, then she's believed, because Chazaka ain't Isha Me'iza Paneha Bifnei Vala. She's not going to be so brazen and say something that if it isn't true. So it can't be that that the woman is simply saying that the man had divorced her. Rather, now note that we won't necessarily allow her to marry somebody else. It's just that they themselves can't get together. But at least that's my sense of it. But Bo'omeres Gerish Tani B'nei Ploni Uploni. So no. So we're going to further modify it and say, she says that you divorced me in front of these two guys. And then what did we do? Ushaelna, we asked the guys, Va'amru lo hayu dvar mo'olam. Nah, that never happened. So clearly she was lying. So the fact that she was lying about the fact that they had gotten divorced. So then now we're worried that she's going to lie in this case. Well, my time of the Ketata, what is the reason that we don't believe her if there's that kind of conflict between them? So Rav Chanina Amar Mishum Demat Meshakra, because she's going to plain lie. And Rav Shimi Barashi Amar Mishum De Amra B'Didami. No, we don't even have to go so far as to say that she'll lie, but rather, just like the case of wartime, she's going to be biased in her viewpoint with respect to what happens to the man, meaning that she may see something, not recognizing the fact that she doesn't have 100% proof, but because it certainly seems likely that the man died, she'll just assume that is in fact the case. Well, my Beinayu, what's the difference between Rav Chanina's position and Rav Shimi Bar Ashi's position?
Are we talking about her general credibility here? Or, I mean, like, let's say she lied about just nothing about the divorce, but the relationship was just, you're just introducing evidence that she lies on,
Excellent question.
I'm not sure what we're talking about here anymore. Just her credibility or the reliability of the evidence that.
Yeah. So my understanding is that of course the court needs to evaluate her honesty, her credibility. Exactly.
Like these are prior instances of lying.
Yes, and the question is, if in fact she has such a conflict-ridden relationship with the husband, so then we're going to be our
relationship, not if she lied about something completely.
Well, not necessarily if she lied. If she lied about her husband, so then the presumption effectively shifts. I think that's the way I would understand it. Obviously, if she lied about something else and we don't find her credible here, well, then she would be disqualified. But if in fact we find her credible in this case, so even if she had lied about other things, so we can go ahead and believe her. On the other hand, if in fact not only was she not credible, but she was, or even if she was somewhat credible, if she had in fact had this kind of relationship with the husband, well, then our presumption is not to believe her. That's the way I would say is, when does the presumption switch from let's believe her to let's not believe her?
So you're saying if there was no strife in the relationship, but you introduce evidence that she lies about X, Y, or Z, then we would believe her here.
The presumption would be to believe her unless in this particular instance we think that she's lying.
Okay.
If based on our questioning, we say, we think that you're lying, and we have, obviously we have support of your past lies, so then they could not believe her. But without that additional questioning, so then the presumption would be to believe her even if she lied about something else. Obviously, if she's lied in court or something like that, I think that would be something different. But here, the point is that this is a sufficiently serious thing that a simple lie elsewhere is not enough. It is specifically the conflict in the relationship that is clearly what's driving the answer. So the Gemara now at the bottom of Kuftet Zayin Amud Al ends, my Benayu, what's the difference between these two positions? So Ika Benayu, the Argil who Ketata, where the man was the one, the Argil who Ketata, that he was the one who started the fight. So if he starts the fight and she's this is not my fault. There's nothing I can do about this. I'm going to pretend that you actually divorced me, because I got to get away from you. Well, then we can understand where she's coming from, and we will be more understanding and not assume that she is lying if in fact she, if she now comes and says that her husband has died, right? So now we ask the similar question that we asked the last time And we said, what about if there's a single witness, right? So this was a case where she was testifying, we talked about a single witness in wartime. And so now the Gemara asks about a single witness when the husband and wife are in conflict. So let's take a look. So So my time of the Eid Echad Mehaman. Why is it that a single witness is believed? Mishum de Milsa de Avida leigluye lo mashaker, because something that is going to be the truth is going to come out, he's not going to lie about. Well, hachanami lo mashaker. So here too, he won't lie, and we could rely on it. Or Odilma. Time of the Eid Echad Mehem, and the reason that we believe a witness is mishum dehi daiko minaspa, that she's going to do investigation and only then get married. And here she doesn't have that same incentive to do investigation because she is going to because she doesn't like the guy. So as a result, she'll just allow her bias to carry her away. So Teku, the Gemara leaves this unresolved. Interestingly, here we say Teku. The other times the last time we tried to answer it, but we were unsuccessful. And indeed, I believe the Rambam actually differentiates between these two cases. And in the former case, where we tried to answer it, but we were unsuccessful in giving a definitive proof, he says that we will believe the single witness in the case of war, but in the case of in this case where there's actually disagreement between them, so then we would not necessarily believe the single witness. So okay, so now we said in our Mishnah that Rabbi Yehuda Omer la'olam eina, that she not believe unless she comes weeping with torn garments. So let's see what that. So now we're going to cite a brisa that gives additional explanation of the rabbi's position and why they disagree with Rabbi Yehuda. Excuse me. So Tanya Amrlo Rabbi Yehuda. They said to Rabbi Yehuda, Lidvarecha, according to your opinion, that the woman needs to come, in an outward display of mourning. So then pikachas tinase shota lo tinase. Then only somebody who is competent will be permitted to remarry, because they will know how to act. But an incompetent person is somebody who's not fully have the full faculties. So then she won't know. No, but both of them should really be able to marry. So that is the additional explanation that the rabbis give to explain their position. So there was a woman who was going to testify in the court of Rabbi Yehuda, obviously about her husband dying. So Amrila, so some rabbis told her, Sifti ba'alech, kiri ma'anech, sisri mezayech. So, do hespedim, for your husband, tear your garments, and, make your hair messed up so that it's clear you're not taking care of yourself. Well, 1 second, the Gemara asks, Alfua Shikra. 1 second, are they teaching her to lie? So Inhu Karabanan Sfiralahu. They held like the rabbis. So Amri Ta'abid Haki Kihecha Delishri. So they're telling her, listen, we think that you should be believed no matter what. So as a result, do this and Rabbi Yehuda will believe you. Raises very interesting questions with respect to whether or not one can lie to help a Beit Din reach the correct conclusion. Although one could say that this is not actually lying, it's just exaggerating. And then, today
they tell you when you go to court, dress appropriately.
Well, that is true, 100%. So the question is really, this is the overall circumstances, right? Is dressing the part, etc., considered lying, or is it just emphasizing what you're trying to convey? So it's an interesting question that is raised in connection with this, but unfortunately, it's time to move on to the next mission. All right.
So you have to do this performance. I mean, it's just
yes. Well, we don't. Thankfully, we don't Fortunately, we don't paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, so we don't have to worry about that. But yes, it would be that would be a little silly. But I think what Rabbi Yehuda is really trying to capture is, let's take a look and see whether this person is talking honestly. And at the end of the day, we got to evaluate that. And so,
his test is like, if you put on this performance, then we believe you. And if you don't put on this performance, then we don't believe you. But that's actually
yeah, 100%. And so one way of understanding this machlokus between the two of them is, I believe that any woman who is engaged, who is like, who has suffered this, will engage in these behaviors. And so as a result, I'm going to let these behaviors determine it. And obviously, if I think that the woman is faking in all of this, well, then I'm not going to believe her.
But it stands that those behaviors might not be in court,
Correct, 100%. And I think that's the position that the rabbis take, is that, a woman may have those feelings and expressions, in her own home, but it doesn't necessarily mean that she will do that in court. Exactly. I think that's exactly right. Okay. So now we're going to see that this issue of whether or not the woman is believed when she comes back from overseas with her husband and says that her husband died actually ties to a machlokus between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. And it's a machlokus, one of those that are dealt with, in, oh, dang it. Now I'm forgetting the seconds. But in any event, that are, is part of the list of situations where Beis Hillel changes its mind. And one of the wonderful things about Beis Hillel is the fact that they were willing to do this, is that they changed their mind when they realized that there was a better position. So Beis Hillel omrim lo shamanu ela b'vav nekatzer medina. The only time that we have a tradition that says that a woman is going to be believed about the death of her husband is where she's in the same country, meaning they can't actually have gone overseas, and where they're coming back from a grain harvest. So Kamasa Shahaya. And indeed, that was in fact the story that originally happened. Rashi notes the last of the wide lines at the top of the page. Shekain Haya Hamasik Damrin Lakaman. We're going to explain, and at the end of today, give you the case where this in fact happened. Below Atiru Chachamim Ela Dugma. So, and according to the Beis Hillel, the rabbis only allowed cases that were similar. Sheyeheya Davar Karov Lanu, so that it would be very similar facts. Umirsisa below Mishkara about Mimedinas Hayam Aina Namanis. And it would be situations where we see that she's going to be afraid of lying, and so therefore she won't lie. But where otherwise, when she's coming from overseas, so maybe she won't be believed. All right, so now let's see, what does Amr Lahem Beis Shammai? Beis Shammai says back to them, 1 second, Achas haba min hakatz, whether you came from a grain harvest, or you come from an olive harvest, or you come from a grape harvest, and even if you come from another country. That the fact that they talked about the grain harvest, that was just how it happened. So Chazar Beis Hillel lahoros ka Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel actually reversed itself and ended up teaching like Beis Shammai. So Tanya Amru lahem Beis Shammai leBeis Hillel. So giving us additional detail now, the Gemara explains l'divreichem, according to what you were saying, based on your logic, right? That we should focus just on the specific case. Well, that was a case that involved a wheat harvest. It wasn't just any general grain harvest. It was specifically a wheat harvest. Well, consider. So, Minayan, how would you know about a barley harvest? And you're saying any kind of harvest. And moreover, now, and once you say, well, we should go broader to do all kinds of grain harvests. Well, once you're doing that, well, boats are mosik go there oder minayan. Why should you not go and talk about grapes, olives, dates, and figs?
We don't know the case. Do we? Do we know the case?
We're going to get the case, but basically the case is
discussing the case when we don't know the facts of the case.
Basically the facts of the case are going to be. So the Gemara has not yet.
Discussing the case, but we don't know the case.
Yes, 100%. That's exactly right. We're referencing the case without actually telling us the case. But the case is, in fact, a woman came back from a what?
We're gonna get the case later?
Yes, we're gonna get the case in about 5 minutes.
Okay.
So, yep. So, Elamasa Shahaya Bekatsir. So this is not uncommon for the Gemara to do this, where you really need to have read the end of the Gemara to get back and understand the beginning of the Gemara. But we've got enough here to understand really what has happened, right? The woman came back from a grain harvest that she went out to with her husband, and she comes back saying that the husband has died. And then they do some investigation and they see that she's telling the truth. And so they decide that in these kind of situations, we're going to believe the woman when she comes back saying that her husband has died. So the question is what's the scope of that belief? So Elamasa Shahaya Bekatzer. So rather, really the situation is that this is again, Beis Shammai talking, the situation is that it involves a case of a wheat harvest. But all these other cases are also covered. So Hachanami Maisa Shahaya Ba'osa Medina, Behuadin Lachulu. And so similarly, even though the thing happened with respect to the person coming back within the country, the same thing is true for any country whatsoever. And Beis Hillel replied, Ba'osa Medina Shishkicha and she Mirsas. Well, 1 second, when she is in the same country, well, then she's going to be afraid that her lie will be caught. Medina Acheres. And where people don't travel so much, Lomir says maybe she won't be afraid and she will lie. Beit Shammai. So why does Beit Shammai say in that situation, even if they're coming around from a different country, that they won't lie, that she won't lie? So that even in the situation where you're going from country to country, there's public travel exists, and there are caravans that go from one country to another, and they go on a regular basis. So people do travel, and so she will get caught in her lie if she's in fact lying. Okay, so Ma Ma'isa Shahaya. All right, so 1 second, what was that case? So Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, the case was Shilfi Katzir Chitin Hayu. It was the end of the days of the wheat harvest. And 10 men went out to harvest wheat. Nashachu nakash le'echad mehen umeis, and a snake bit one of them. Uvas ishto b'hodia lebeisdin, and the wife came back and told the court. V'shalchu matzu kidvareha, and they found that she was telling the truth. Ba'osa shah amru, at that moment they said, ha'isha shah amra meis bali tinase, that a woman who says that her husband died, she can get married. Meis bali tisyabem. If she says that her husband died, she can be taken in Yibum. And so as a result, the question is how broad do we take that scope? All right, so Nema Rebbe, now we're going to try to align the two positions of Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, the a priori positions of Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. Namely, Beis Hillel says we limit a rule to the specific facts of the particular case that was involved. And Beis Shammai says, no, we don't limit the rule to the specific case. So name Rabbi Chananya ben Akiva l'birabanan beplukta de Beis Shammai uBeit Hillel kamiflagi. Let's say that Chananya ben Akiva and the rabbis were arguing about the same thing, same basic idea. The Tanya, lo yisa adam me chatas ve'efer chatas, that if v'yavirein b'yardein b'uvasfina, that you're not allowed to take chatas water, meaning the water from the mixture of paraduma ashes and special water that was combined in order to sprinkle it on people who are tamei l'meis, or the ashes themselves. You're not allowed to carry them across the Jordan on a boat. And you're not allowed to throw them from one side to the other. Below yishitem al pnei hamayim, and you can't float them across. Below yerkibim lo al gabi behema, below al gabi chavero, and you can't ride on an animal or on a friend. Ela imkain hayuraglav no goes pakarka. You have to be sure that the river is so low that your feet are touching the ground. If your feet are touching the ground, you, the rider, are touching the ground, well, then we'll allow that because that's not a separation. Aval maviram al gesher, or you can go over a bridge. So echad yardain ve'echad shar naharos, and it applies both to the Jordan and to other rivers. So Rabbi Chanina ben Kiva Omer Lo Amru Ela Yardenu Vasina Uchamasa Shahaya. That whereas Rabbi Chananya ben Akiva says, no, it's not all those cases. Though the prohibition is only for carrying the ashes or the water across the Jordan on a boat, because that was the case. That was what happened. So Lema Rabbanan da Amri Kebei Shammai. So let's say that the rabbis, the Tanakama in this Braisa is in fact the rabbis, whereas the Rabbi Chananya ben Akiva da Amri Kebei Hillel. And the Rabbi Chananya ben Akiva is like Beis Hillel, right? So Rabbi Chananya ben Akiva says we limit it to the facts of the specific case, and the rabbis say no, we expand it to all similar situations. So no, you do not have to say that these two disputes are in fact aligned, because Amr Lach Rabban and the rabbis could say to you Anan da Amrin Af Beis Hillel, that in fact we would say even like Beis Hillel. Because when does Beis Hillel adkan lo ka'amr Beis Hillel hasam elamishum demirsas? Why is it that the Beis Hillel doesn't expand the Gzeira? They don't expand the Gzeira because we're worried that the situation is different and that she will not be afraid of lying when she's coming from a different country. So b'makom karov mirsas, right? B'makom rachok lo mirsas. When she's coming from someplace close, she'll be afraid. When she's coming from somewhere distance, she's not going to be afraid. Well, hafka mali yarden mali sharnaharos. For the other case, and it comes to the ashes and the water, and you're taking them across a body of water, who cares what body of water is? If we're concerned about something tameh happening to it, it doesn't make a difference. There's no difference between the Yarden and some other body of water. So as a result, the rabbis could say that even Beit Hillel would agree with us. And similarly, Rabbi Chananya ben Akiva, Rabbi Chananya ben Akiva would tell you, Ana da Amri Afla Beis Shammai. No, Beis Shammai could even agree with me, because Ad Kan Lo Ka'amr Beis Shammai Hasam Ela Mishum De'ihi Daikam Nasva. That the whole reason that we would allow Beis Shammai would allow in all of these cases the woman to get remarried if she says that her husband died is because she's going to be sure to investigate carefully and not say anything unless she was certain. So Mali Makom Karov, Mali Makom Rachu. Who cares whether it's a close place or a far place? That hacha, but here mishum ma'isa shahaya. Really, it's not about whether or not she's investigating. It's about the facts. Here, the facts are what determines it. The Yarden was fina to havimasa gazarabana. So only when it was in the Yarden and it was on a boat, that's where the rabbis made the decree. So b'shar naharus de lo havimasa lo gazarabanan. So the point is Rav Chananya ben Akiva would tell you that what matters in the case of the chatas water is what were the actual facts. But in the case of the woman, where they determined that in fact she wasn't lying, because of course she would investigate, it wasn't the facts that was determining us as to why we should have this gzeira. It was the underlying circumstances, and the underlying circumstances are that she will investigate. So we've determined that we can't actually tie the Chatas water brisa with our Mishnah and the positions of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. So my Ma'isa Shahaya. So this is of course a great place to end, which is what was the case. The Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav. So again, Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rav, Ma'isa ba'adam Shahaya Mavir Mechatas ve'Ever Chatas b'Yardenu Basvina. So a guy was taking the Chatas water and ashes across the Yarden. V'nimtza kazayas minames tachov b'karka'is shel svina, and they found an olive-sized piece of the flesh of a human being and from a corpse, found in the in the floor of the boat. Well, so at that moment, the rabbi said, "Lo yisa adam mechatas ve'ever chatas b'yavirim b'Yardenu usvina." So as a result, don't take a boat across, because we're worried that somebody may have died and they may have left a piece of them on the boat. So tomorrow we will pick up.
What? I mean, that's just a random, right?
It certainly seems like it, and that would be right. That random aspect of it is why Rav Chananya ben Akiva would say we limit the gzeira to just those facts. And whereas the rabbis say, no, because of remember that the reason for our concern is because of the tremendous value of the para aduma. Right. So, I mean, so you can imagine that once they had a situation where the para aduma ashes and water got ruined, they're going to be ever more careful about it. And that's really the debate. The question is, how far do we take things in our need to be as careful as possible? Okay. All right. So tomorrow, we're going to learn another Mishnah involving Beit Hillel reversing itself. And as we discuss whether the wife who testifies that her husband has died is entitled to collect on her ksuba. Right. So so here we're going to believe her, but now do we also believe her to let her claim the monetary claim that's associated with it? So for that, you got to stay tuned. Have a good Shabbos. Now, remember, we are not meeting on Shabbos tomorrow. I don't know exactly what the plan is, whether the plan is to do after Shabbos by Zoom, or whether it's just that we'll participate in the RJC Daf Yomi tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the plan? Okay.
I think so. We're not able to do it the Shabbos.
Okay.
I mean,
all right. So have a wonderful Shabbos and a very enjoyable 4th of July weekend, and look forward to continuing our learning. We are under a week away. I hope that you'll both be able to join us at the joint siyum with the RJC. We'll hear from Rabbi Yonah Rees, a fellow Yale Law alum and a friend of Daf Yomi and of the people who are leading Daf Yomi. So it'll be nice to.
When is that?
That will be on Thursday. Thursday, I think, is the 7th. Right. And it's going to be at 7:15 p.m. at the RJC, and we should be finished in time to enable people to get back to whatever shul they want to for Mincha Marav.
I see. Okay, thank you.
All right. Have a wonderful day. Have a fabulous Shabbos.
Shabbos, thank you.
Well, bye-bye.
See you soon. Thank you. We'll go away.